Hello, 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 everyone who may be watching this now or in the future. Thanks for joining us this evening. This is a kind of a new experiment that I'm trying. I'm going to interview speakers that are going to be presenting at the user groups that I help run. And tonight, the man who's going to let me use him as a guinea pig for this experiment, I guess, Mr. Chris Gardner from Huntsville, Alabama. Chris, how are you, sir?
Doing very good. I didn't notice when we looked at it earlier, but I did find it quite ironic that the code in the background for the .NET Users Group promo was all JavaScript.
Yeah, well, I used what I could find on Envato Elements.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's what
I
the
pay.
URL works. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I pay for. I'm going to look for. I'll look for something else. I mean, I made that last night. It was just something that I threw together because I actually came up with this idea yesterday afternoon. Martine Dowd, and I was watching her stream, and somehow the idea we got. I don't know how it came up, but that's when I came up with this idea. It's like I should interview the speakers for the user groups. Real quickly before we begin, I do want to mention one thing. I want to mention TDevConf. So TDevConf is the Tennessee Developers Conference. It is a virtual conference that has been held. One-day virtual conference has been held every day for the last 2 years, and we're going to be bringing it back this year in 2022. It will be Friday, September the 30th. You can follow us at TDevConf on Twitter. And if you're interested in speaking at TDevConf, our call for speakers is open until June 6th. I believe it's June 6th, midnight Central Time is when it ends. And that can be found at papercall.io/TDevConf2022. So as I said earlier, Mr. Chris Gardner is going to be speaking, and as you saw in the pre-roll, there's going to be speaking a week from tomorrow at the Memphis.NET user group, and he's going to be presenting Understanding How Your CPU Thinks. So Chris, why don't you tell us a little bit about what this is going through? Because I think this is a kind of a little bit of a different talk for you.
It is and it isn't. So there's a talk I had previously made called Demystifying the .NET Runtime that really said, let's look at what's going on in C# and go one layer below and look at what's happening with the MSIL behind it to kind of understand why there's some weird quirks between the two and why you can do certain things in the runtime and certain things you can't do in the runtime and the way reflection works and stuff like that. After doing that as a side project, which I've been doing on my Twitch stream, I've been working on this F# library that does really weird math stuff. We'll just leave it at that for now. But in doing it, I had to try to figure out how to implement a bunch of these algorithms we take for granted. Things like multiplying integers, like doing it by hand, and doing a toString and a parse function for a number and things like that. And kind of these more computer sciencey type issues. And then just talking to people in general, it's amazing how many people these days, and I don't mean this as any sort of a bad thing or whatnot, have never been into any sort of a real computer science type of environment. They came through boot camps. They were self-taught. They are wonderful programmers, but maybe they don't understand hardware architecture or what's actually going on, on the silicon or that kind of, intermediate layer. So, or some of these, common algorithms that you just take for granted because every language has it built in. How do these things actually work? So this talk was an evolution of all those put together where it was like, let's take the code and go the step deeper and talk about in very abstract terms what's really going on in the hardware layer and understanding what's going on in the hardware layer, both just, conceptually how those parts actually work together and somewhat how the computer reads the instructions, and then going the next step and saying, let's talk about some of these common algorithms and how they really work. Because I think some people don't understand just little silly things. If you understand how strangely complex they work, how much you can really optimize your code if you just, toString is a really complex function, especially for a sufficiently large number. If you're hitting it in a loop, but the value you're toStringing isn't changing, that could be a huge performance hit. So it's kind of an idea of let's look at what some of these things do and give you an understanding of why this is so much longer than this is so much longer than this, as a way to say, maybe when I'm writing these algorithms, there's a more optimized way to do it, which sounds like micro optimization. But when you're talking about large loops, those types of things really pay off.
So it sounds like that this is it's kind of almost more of a generalist talk than it is actually a dot. I mean, you're a big .NET guy. You have been for a long time, but it sounds like it would actually apply to really almost anybody in any programming language.
Yeah, I've often joked that this is like a comp sci degree in an hour. But the reason I kind of throw it in .NET talks is because, as I mentioned at the beginning, there was an F# project that inspired this. So I do actually pull up that F# code or portions of it as part of the talk. You don't really have to know F#, but if you're familiar with .NET, and it's a very compact way to show these algorithms using the F# syntax, where I can talk about them and say, this is what this is happening, and it's familiar. It's extremely familiar to a .NET person, even though I am doing more of the strict functional version and not the object-oriented version of F#. But that's kind of why I lump it as a .NET. But yeah, really anybody can get something out of this one, because it is more about how these pieces come together all the way from the hardware through the compiler and all that.
Now, I've seen I've seen some of the Twitch streams that kind of inspired this talk, and you're actually one of the few people I know who can make my brain hurt. And and those and those and those actually did. So while it's not for .NET people, specifically not for .NET people, so to speak, even though, like you said, there's some F# in there. What would somebody who is, and the reason why I enjoy the streams is because I love that, going in deep level. What would somebody who is not maybe as into the internals of everything, what would they take away from it?
I think the biggest thing I'm trying to get people to take away from this is sometimes it's silly things that when you lay out, people can get like, people know addition to simple binary numbers is fairly easy. Almost everybody, trivially knows how to do it, whether or not they know specifics and like inverting stuff and whatnot like that. But on a trivial matter, they could do that. And then at one point in time, we talk about multiplication as well, but that's not the most optimized way to do multiplication, even if you did it that way. And for reference, this library does mathematics on numbers with no upper bound, no lower bound. So basically, it's an unlimited sized integer at its base level, and it's very fast and efficient. So you're not stuck at 64 bits. You can go up all the way up to, hundreds of bits if you need to. When you start dealing at that scale, doing like taking a number and adding it to itself millions of times is not efficient. Even if you're doing it the way the computer does it, it's not efficient. There's no other way around it, right? And I'll quickly go into the algorithm. It's actually part of the talk, so I'll go into much more detail and I'll save the code up. But basically, binary multiplication, if you're doing bit shifting, so you've got a string of, trying to get all my hands on the screen, you got a string of bits and you shift it to the left so that the bottom one pops off. That's the same as a divide by 2. If you shift it the other way, it's the same as a multiply by 2. You basically start bit shifting, and anytime you find a 1, you add a shifted version of the other one, and then you just add all those up instead of just adding 10 million times. And so if you think about the way you were taught in elementary school to do long division, it's very much like that, or long multiplication. But even still at that part, even if you're saying, okay, here's 1 plus 1, well, let's say like here's 10 plus 10. Well, 20, that's easy. Well, here's 10 times 10. Well, you've got all these weird shift operations and other things that are going on. That's not really that efficient. And then you go to that next step and you start talking about exponentiation, And that gets really crazy. I think that's the next thing we're going to implement on stream because I finally figured out how to do that. And that gets really, really crazy. So just knowing how these operators work and knowing, hey, there's a time you need to do them, but sometimes there's a time when you can look and say, hey, instead of just brute force multiplying this and brute force multiplying this and add this together, can I, knowing, human wise, do some factoring and kind of rearrange the numbers to reduce the operations, just because that will do so much better. And this goes all the way through to, you start talking about string manipulations, you start talking about how strings get used inside most computers and things like that, then you really go, let's actually think about what's the best way to break this stuff down. And in the long run, it pays off dividends.
So we mentioned your stream several times, and your stream, want to mention that. So you're a freestyle coder basically everywhere, aren't you?
Just about. There's a few places gamer related where there's a different one, but just about anywhere else I am.
But you stream on Twitch at Freestyle Coder. We were talking before a little bit. Talk about you were going to get back to your schedule. When you get back to your schedule, when are you going to stream?
So I'm hoping to still keep up the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, for the monogame Monday, the web Wednesday, the functional Friday, just like I was doing before I took the little break. Of all ironies, I had to take the semester off because I was teaching a college class and just didn't have time. Keep that. I may slightly shift when they happen. Originally, I was doing them at like 1 to 2 p.m. Central Time. But that seems to be a hotbed for meetings with my new job. So I may shift it to somewhere like mid-morning or something like that, just to find a time where I'm not having to worry so much about meetings and whatnot. So that part's still going to be slightly up in the air. But it will be sometime late morning, early afternoon, Monday, Wednesday, Fridays. For sure, starting probably in about a week and a half. There may be a kind of test stream sometime next week, but I'm targeting week after next to start hitting them again.
Okay, and the library that you're writing, is it open source? Is it on GitHub or?
It is open source. It is on GitHub. If you go to my GitHub, github.com/freestylecoder, there's a library. I believe it's just called Math. It may be called freestylecoding.math or something like that, but it's called Math. And the original concept behind it was, let's do an arbitrary length unsigned integer. And then I got that working. So I said, okay, well, what would it take to do a signed integer? And I got that working. So I said, what would it take to do a rational number, which is a number over another number? And I got that working. So then I said, what would it take to get a 100% precise floating point number of unlimited size? Sort of. And I got that working. Right now, there's a hard-coded value in it that tells it to stop at 30 decimal places, just because I needed a way to stop a repeating fraction.
Right.
Eventually, I hope to change it to where you can say, for this operation, I need this number of decimal places. You can throw it up or down. You can let it go unlimited, and it will try to catch a repeating factor and stop it at some point. But that's future work. But it is at that 30 decimal point stop. It is 100% working. And if you need more than 30 decimal places, not 30 significant figures, 30 decimal or 30 significant figures, I think is what it technically does, actually. Then yeah.
Yeah. So I know that you have a degree in mathematics,
Yes.
and you're definitely putting that to work. So where are you planning on taking this in the future?
I originally started writing it because I was playing around with combinatorics, which becomes a subset of probability. If you've ever done any sort of probability work, you're familiar with combinations and permutations and the way you have to put those together to come up with probabilities. I was playing around with some probability stuff, and I realized I needed to do some combinatoric stuff, so I wrote all the libraries for combinatorics and realized how quickly those overflowed. I think what I was playing around with was something like, how many ways can I pick a string of 8 from 20 objects or something like that, and I was just overflowing everything. So I started playing around. That's when I started playing around with the idea. So it was originally written as a library, and some of that code's still hidden in there to allow combinatorics to be as big as they need to be. And then also there's some stuff that does some stuff with prime numbers in there. That's kind of one of the next areas I really want to flesh out, because I've learned better algorithms to detect whether or not something's a prime and things like that. But that's kind of where it's going eventually. So as I want to add these larger math functions and things that don't get implemented very well in most modern languages, just because the size of most data types don't handle it well.
Okay, cool. Well, I want to talk to you about some other things that aren't necessarily code related here, and we'll do that after this quick message. So that was Scenic City Summit, which is the other conference that I help run, which is held every year in Chattanooga, Tennessee. We will be back in person this year at the Chattanooga Convention Center on July 22nd. That's a Friday, I believe. It's a one-day tech conference. And our call for speakers is still open. If you go to sessionize.com, scenic-city-summit-2022, and also Scenic Summit on Twitter. I should probably have a banner for that, but it's not Scenic City Summit on Twitter. I think that, I don't know if that was taken or if it was too long, but it's Scenic Summit on Twitter. So, Chris, we mentioned several conferences. You also run a conference, don't you?
I do. I run DevSpace down here in Huntsville.
So at DevSpace, if you want to know more about that, you can go to you can follow them on Twitter at DevSpaceConf, or go to devspaceconf.com. Do you have any news about DevSpaceConf 2022?
Yes and no. So I can
Okay.
unofficially say we've already confirmed our dates with the venue. We should be September 8th and 9th. I will actually pull up it's a Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Yeah, September 8th and 9th. We are having a meeting with all the organizers and board members and everything sometime within about the next week to finally get all the last of our ducks in a row, and we'll hopefully get everything really rolling past that. But I don't want to say anything too official until we talk to, until we have the discussion with everybody. But I know we're screaming into a halt right now. So the call for speakers should be open fairly soon. It will probably be open for a surprisingly small period of time, just because of the time constraints we put ourselves in. I put us all in. It's all on me. And so we can get that ball rolling. But yeah, we're excited for another in-person year, and just the amount of stuff that has happened in downtown Huntsville since the last time we got to have one, which was 2019, if I recall correctly. Mm-hmm. I mean, the things that have, we just got announced that we're the #1 city to live in by U.S. News and World Report. We just got approved to be the first space landing site for a public airport. All sorts of cool stuff's happening here in town. Downtown's growing up like a weed. I'm excited to welcome people back. We just have to hunker down and get it done.
Now, I have to ask you, the first public airport for a space landing site. What does that mean? Because of course, Huntsville, what is it? It's the Rocket Science
Rocket
Center.
City. Yep.
I'm sorry?
It's Rocket City.
Rocket City.
Yep.
But what is this the space landing in a public airport? What is that?
All right. Let me back up a little bit and then I'll get to that.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know, Huntsville was the start of the space program in the mid 40s, early 50s. A German rocket scientist named Werner von Braun defected from Nazi Germany, came to Huntsville, started working on what eventually became the Apollo rockets and the Saturn rockets, and what led us to space. So ever since then, it's been known as the Rocket City. We have the United States Space and Rocket Center here in town, et cetera, et cetera. It's a big source of pride for us all here. Earlier, we threw a ring in the hat not too long ago to be when they announced the Space Force, no matter what your feelings are about that, when they announced it, we threw our ring in the hat to become the headquarters of it. We ended up on 3 different times now we have been awarded it. We were awarded it. Somebody cried foul. They re-looked at all the data. We won it again. They cried foul again. They just found out we won it again. We're pretty sure we have it now. So with that, we have our airport, Huntsville International Airport. And so we decided it would be a big deal if we could become the first airport certified to basically land a commercial aircraft from space.
Okay.
So, and I don't know what they did. Huntsville International Airport ain't that big, but we are 100%. We are the first airport in the world, as far as we know, cleared by the FAA to actually land a spacecraft.
Okay, interesting. So no ETA on when that's actually going to happen for the first time.
No. Not like we're revving up the flights next week, but I mean, in some ways, there's a lot of really good reasons behind that. I mean, we've got Boeing is literally right behind the airport, and they're doing a lot of stuff, especially with the International Space Station and things like that. Blue Origin has a rocket factory down the road in Decatur, which is 20 miles down the interstate. There's a lot of that stuff happening in town. So there's a lot of good reasons for these types of things to happen. We have Marshall Space Flight Center here, so we've already got a NASA headquarters here. So it just kind of made sense. But I do think they kind of tried to get all the clearances done just to say we were the first before they really had any way that we were ever going to do anything with it.
And one of the really cool sites when you're driving into Huntsville, of course, Huntsville is not on the interstate. They had to build an interstate to get to Huntsville. So you really can't miss it. Is passing by the visitor center for the space for the Rocket Science Center and seeing all of the models. They got a Saturn V out there. They've got at least the space shuttle. That's not one of the actual space shuttles.
We're supposed to eventually be getting one of the actual space shuttles now that they're all decommissioned. There normally is a 1-to-1 scale replica that's in the back. It's not really visible from the road. It is down right now because they're cleaning it. But it should be back up soon. The ones you can see from the interstates are, I think, the Saturn III and the Saturn II. The Saturn V is in the big building right beside it. So it's a big glass building and you can see it. But it is an actual Saturn V that you can actually walk around and look at all the pieces of, and they've got the different stages broken apart so you can see all the inner workings of it and all that. But yeah, all that's down there. And your story, which is funny, when they built the interstate system, because I actually looked up the history of this. Why doesn't 565 go through Huntsville? When they built the interstate system, it was the Dwight D. Eisenhower interstate system. This was I think it was approved in the early 40s, late 30s, early 40s. I don't remember exactly when. And they were choosing the sites. At that point in time, Huntsville was this rinky-dinky mill town, and Decatur was the major city on the interstate, on the river, and it was a big port town.
Right.
So they planned the interstate and started building it and whatnot. And then like 10, 15 years afterwards, when all the rocket stuff came in and it really boomed, by then it was kind of too late. So yeah, we're just in interstate spur right now.
So we talked a little bit about your technical, your coding, your live coding stream. You're also an avid gamer. What do you do? What do you do on your gaming stream?
Yeah, I do. I run 2 gaming streams normally. I was a little more rigorous about them while I was not doing my coding streams, just because I had to keep the channel active and whatnot. But my thoughts behind them is, if life gets in the way, those are the first to go.
Right.
And for example, I would normally be doing a stream on a Saturday night, which I'm not doing this week because I'm going to a concert. Sorry. But normally on Saturday nights, starting at 9 p.m. Central, basically right after I send the kids to bed, I'll play some sort of horror game. So that's generally always a mature rated game. It's not always necessarily a horror game. We did Halo Infinite. We did Shadow of the Tomb Raider. But typically it's meant to be something more of a survival horror or something like that. Right now we're doing the Resident Evil remake. And we're probably about halfway through that. And it'll go for 3 or 4 hours. You know, I shoot for about midnight or when we find a good stopping point. And then Sunday afternoon, starting at 1 p.m. Central until my wife's telling me I have to shorten this stream. So till about 3 or 4. It's what I call Sunday afternoon matinee gaming. It's some sort of family-friendly game. We've done a bunch of the Pokemon games on there, things like that. We did a bunch of the Zelda games on there. It's generally a game where if my kids want to come in the room, they can come and be on camera, and they do from time to time. We'll have them popping in from here or there. Right now for that, I'm playing the original Kingdom Hearts. Well, I'm playing the HD remix of the original Kingdom Hearts, which is a game I never played back in the day because I really do not like the PlayStation controller, so I gave up on it because of the PlayStation controller. But now I have the Xbox version.
Cool. So we're getting kind of close to time here. Anything else you want to tell us about your work or about your other community activities that you're involved in? Anything else you'd like to tell us?
The biggest things I have coming out is of course I'm taking it with a grain of salt because we're not completely out of this pandemic yet, but I'm very excited to be getting back out in the community. I got a bunch of different conferences I'm going to be speaking at coming here soon. I kind of wish I could have driven up to Memphis, but I recently switched jobs and there just wasn't a good way to do it at this time.
All right.
But yeah, I'll be at that conference up in Wisconsin. I will be at KCDC. I will be at Code Palooza. At least y'all can come see me at my conference. I'm gonna maybe try Scenic City Summit, but again, those other 3 are multi-day trips, which work are paying for and back to back, and I have to bill hours somewhere. So, but yeah, that's my biggest thing is yes, come see me on the Twitch stream. I love interacting with the audience, but get out in the community. Let's try to get out there and meet each other again. And I'm really looking forward to that.
In other words, you should RSVP at MNUG.net and come see. And if you come watch virtual, that's great. But if you're local to Memphis, come to the Microsoft office. The Microsoft office, it's still basically brand new because it was only 6 months old when everything shut down, and it's still basically brand new. So if you go to mnug.net, that will redirect you to Meetup where you can RSVP. And on a personal note, I will be at Code Palooza, and I will be, if you'll have me, at DevSpace as well. So and I hope that your schedule does allow you to come to Scenic City Summit. So once again, everybody, Mr. Chris Gardner, why we know him for like about 10 years, I guess, longer than we should probably admit to. So, and I know him as nothing other than a fantastic speaker. And if you really want those deep dives that get you into the internals of what's going on, Chris is your man. Chris, thank you very much for spending some time with me this evening.
Thank you for having me. It's always a blast to catch up with you.
All right. See you later, my friend.
Yep.